Hey everybody, this is Christian Buckley with Collab Talk. Collab Talk is an independent research and technical marketing services company. A lot of what I do is I provide fractional CMO services to tech companies. I've been in the space, well, IT in general for almost 30 years, and a good portion of that have had different marketing roles. I'm not an SEO expert. Most of what I do, and well, I would classify myself as a content marketing expert, but definitely around marketing strategy, messaging and positioning, go-to-market strategy, kind of those aspects of marketing. I am a field marketing guy, a technology evangelist, and have worked with dozens of companies, large and small, to build out campaigns, to build out strategies and take products and services to market. And so this isn't your traditional review of just the digital marketing specifically aspects, but I get into some of the fundamental, the underlying issues. We'll talk about some of the common mistakes that companies make that have a direct impact of their digital marketing strategies. And then some strategies that I use. And on the strategies, I'll warn you that I get a little bit into the weeds on some of those topics. Some of the slides are a bit of of eye charts there, but you can find this entire presentation if you do a search out on slideshare.net and go through things and read at your leisure, at your own speed. Let's get underway. All right, so what is good digital marketing? And I know that everybody has their opinion. I certainly have some ads and some campaigns that I think are effective that I see, but most of us think of, these ads that we see on TV or in the print ads. I mean, here at the top left, if you didn't see this, the Tide commercials, many commercials that were part of the latest Super Bowl. They're just fantastic. I really do. I like that billboard for Coca-Cola. Where it's actually pointing down at the recycling. I think it's a great visual. And then if you've not seen this, Burger King did that print series of the anti-clown ads, which is hilarious. For some very effective marketing. I think the Tide ad, if you've not seen those, go out to YouTube, look up Tide ad Super Bowl and look at all of them together. It is one of the better branding experiences of one of the better sets of commercials for the Super Bowl that I've seen in many, many years. But there's also just been a renaissance of website design, of email design, where designers, some folks out there get it. Finally, it needs to be visually pleasing. Just don't look at my website, but they have this functional, simplistic design that moves you through that journey that you want people to go through. Look at these stats, jump to that information that I need. But move people down through that, navigate down through that page or through that email to that call of action. Companies are getting really smart about that. But if you look back over what's been happening over the last decades, the marketing landscape itself has really changed. It's not, you can't just go out there and say, hey, we're going to buy some TV time and some radio spots and go out there and advertise. It has become so fragmented, so personalized, so segmented that you need to be very clear on what you're trying to achieve, the audience you're trying to reach, and where to find these people and how to best connect with them. It's not so simple as, I'm trying to remember when I did my marketing undergrad 30 years ago, it was something like, 4 to 6 touches before a customer makes a purchase decision. And I don't know what the thinking is now, but my experience through most digital marketing is you're probably closer to 15 to 20 touches. That might be you're receiving emails, many of which aren't opened, reading your blog, downloading content, participating in a webinar, signing up for a demo. I mean, all of those things are touches and multiple sales calls that are happening in between all those activities before a customer actually moves forward and makes a decision. And so content marketing and digital marketing in general have become essential to just modern marketing, and making sure that you're thinking through who you're trying to reach and how. Talk about some of those pieces. I mean, even if you look at this data that is a little bit old, came out of PwC, but looking at the volume of marketing that's happening through the internet, but even through these other more traditional channels, TV, radio, consumer, newspaper, all of these things, there are digital, growing digital components to each of those traditional marketing methods. And it's going beyond that. I'd even say that there's video and cinema where you can grab a code or a text off of watching a movie. You've seen that in previews to go and look at things. And there's advertising that is happening inside of video games as well. So it's everywhere, and so you can build very comprehensive, specific, targeted digital campaigns across all of these media channels. So where do most organizations go wrong? So one primary thing in the digital marketing is that the number one focus is on, and I'm not knocking it, but the SEO side is the keywords and those metrics that are coming out of the SEO side of things. It's telling you some of the information. It's not telling you all of the information, and it's certainly not telling you where things are going. It's telling you what you've already done and how effective those things have been, but it's not everything. So a lot of organizations think this way. They think SEO equals marketing, and they don't go beyond that. In fact, here in my state, I'm in Utah here in the US, marketing is almost equated as SEO. You ask somebody, oh, we're looking for help with marketing. What they're actually talking about is looking for help with SEO. I don't do SEO. The type of consulting I do for companies is around their broader strategy, of which SEO is a component of that. So they fail to understand and ensure that they're being authentic in the messages, in the story, in their positioning of the products and services, and how important that is. Customers are getting very smart. They understand when you have paid no offense, but a 22-year-old recent college grad who writes really smart ad copy, but doesn't know what they're talking about and how to connect with that customer. So seeing pretty copy versus authentic thought leadership in the content, really leading that and building trust and the future advocacy with clients. You don't get that just from great copy. So another mistake that's made is that nurturing ends with the sale. And I've seen this again and again in organizations that I work with, and I was a technology evangelist with software companies, and that was something that was a huge problem that we went back and worked on, spent a lot of time building out. And so you see more and more roles around customer success and how that is a long-term after the sale, that the relationship doesn't end, because that's actually where you go beyond just a happy customer and start building advocates that are driving other potential clients over your direction. And here's probably the biggest mistake, and I'll come back to this a couple times, but companies focus on what all of their competitors are doing, the exact same strategies, just going out and doing the same thing, painting it different color and expecting a different result. You're not going to stand out that way. And so this is part of that marketing mix, changing things up, your price, promotion, placement, the product, how many P's you want to add in, people have over time added others. But you're constantly adjusting those things, looking at what's happening in the competitive landscape and saying, how can we continue to stand out while being authentic? So there's a great book, if you've not ever read it, it came out in the 90s by Seth Godin. You've probably heard of Seth, who's kind of a marketing guru that's out there, but he talked about permission marketing. And he really was the guru on this topic to say that those traditional methods, so started dying off in the early 2000s of pushing your message to customers is just not effective. And you have to have a relationship and have that some level of trust with those clients and get their permission and pull them over to your side. Here's an example. I write a lot of content for clients, white papers, ebooks, other feature articles, and I always recommend, I said, I don't believe that putting this document, this item behind, this asset behind a form will give you the result you're looking for. It's much more effective is to, there's this one thought process there is that, well, only the people who are really serious will download. No, people see barriers to reading the content if they're in a train of thought and I need to go sign up for yet another list. There are people who would be valid, potential customers that will not want to do those additional clicks, fill out those forms. If they don't know you, don't trust you, they're not going to go and do that. Maybe the second or third time if you have exclusive content to people that are already within your system. But if you're reaching out there trying to build a list, trying to get people to come and take a look at your product or service, brand that asset and make it, give them a reason to take that next step, to download or read it and have call to actions within that asset. And you're going to get a higher volume and a better quality of respondents that are out of that assets because you're pulling them in. They've decided to reach out to you versus you require them to give their information before they're able to get that content. They don't know yet that it's even of value to give you that trust. So Peter Drucker talked about, look, there's really the goal is marketing and innovation are really driving the results, and so everything else is a cost. You need to use marketing as that distinguishing factor and be unique. Thing that I talk about a lot. I wrote an article a number of years ago, so it was 5-6 years ago now, and on LinkedIn. And I talked about that marketing baseline. If you think about what's underneath that baseline, this is what your competitors are doing. And I'm sure you're doing most or all of these things as well. But you're conducting webinars, you have your email campaigns, you've got your blog posts out there, your channel development, so partners. I've got them combined there, but you're doing email marketing, of course. You're doing conferences as well, public relations. You've got your branding, the style guides. You've got your social presence, all those different things. But what are those above the line activities? So the marketing baseline, everything below the line, this is what everyone else is doing. To stand out, the number one thing is demonstrate that thought leadership. Now, what that means in your segment, depending on what you're selling, what you're trying to accomplish, can mean different things. But thought leadership, going out there and demonstrating that you understand the space, understand the segment, and you are an expert is an important aspect of those above the line marketing activities. Building out community is something, again, where you're doing something that benefits the community, you're supporting them, you're building that out, you're providing tools and resources, you're participating actively within that without asking for anything back. That's the hard part. Otherwise, it becomes part of your channel development. It becomes part of your campaigns and your webinars. Building advocacy, and I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but again, this is the beyond. This is where if you're demonstrated the thought leadership, you're building the trust out there, you're part of actively participating in those communities which you're trying to reach. What happens then is people start listening to that, they become a fan of what you're doing, and if they believe in your product or your service, then they also then become advocates for that. Now, again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Innovation is another way to stand out. So go out, if your job is you're looking at what's selling the most out on Amazon and you're creating copycat products, then innovation probably isn't the leading above the line marketing factor for you. But in general, innovation is a key differentiator. Having that trust. Again, this is a roll-up to everything I've just talked about above the line, but building that trust. There are customers out there, there are companies out there who have done a lot of business, have a lot of sales, and they could be the leader in the segment which you're trying to grow and build within, but they aren't trusted. That's an important differentiator. You can have higher prices and you can have longer lead times to fulfill orders, but if people trust that you're the expert, that you're authentically part of the community, and they have that trust, you're going to grow, you're going to be successful. That is a way to stand out. Demonstrating that passion is another way that you can stand out from the crowd. I speak at a lot of conferences. I've presented at over 250 in the last decade, and I often get people that come up that said, I wasn't really interested in learning, but I just really felt the passion and what you're talking about. Like, you get it, you understand, and so you can convey a lot by that passion. Especially as you've got to kind of be careful with that passion when you're talking about competitive situations, because just a rule of thumb, it never pays off to trash a competitor. Never, ever pays off. So I just spent a lot of my career cleaning up after salespeople that were a bit enthusiastic about talking negatively about competitors. But that's a way that you can, again, stand out, get those people that are those core influencers that live and breathe the product or service that you're selling, and to demonstrate their passion on a regular basis. Being original in your approach, and this is where you can be fun with the brand, with the channel, with the method that you're advertising, that you're communicating. And so there is a lot to say about being unique, and you're not going to be able to go out and create a viral video with every campaign that you go and create, but there's something to be said about going out and doing something that's new and different and fun and funny, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're in mortuary services, maybe comedy is not the right approach hey, maybe it is. Maybe get the lighthearted crowd. But being original in your approach is something that, and being unique is something that's certainly important. And then, as I've talked about again and again, being authentic. And what does this mean? It means that you're not going out there and saying something but meaning something else. I've often been accused of wearing my heart on my sleeve. What that means is that if you ask me my opinion, I'll tell you my opinion. And not everyone is happy with the answers I provide, but they know that I'm being honest and truthful, and I'm authentic in my responses. And so that's something that you need to think a lot about, and make sure that whatever your approach is, that the positioning, your messaging and positioning, your campaigns, that they are authentic and true to what you're offering, who you are as a company, and who you're trying to reach. Because people will see right through that. If they see that, I see some great content, but this is completely separate from what we then hear from your salespeople. That disconnect between what marketing is telling us and then the reality with sales. You need to do a true up there. You need to either change your marketing to align with the reality of your sales process and your product or service team, or you need to bring your sales team up to speed with where the rest of the company is. If there's that disconnect, people will identify that as a mismatch in authenticity, and they will not build trust in your brand. So the number one failure of organizations with marketing has nothing to do with the technology. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are not using different marketing automations tools. It has everything to do with the planning. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through here very quickly some of the common mistakes. But part of this, this is actually a way that I convey that. So if you've not ever seen this movie, Spaceballs, important American film, one of the classics, I think. There's actually one scene. For those that have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. When you had the hero over there on the far left, the Han Solo like your character, and John Candy there next to him, who is the Chewbacca-like character. But at the bad guys, big helmet man there up top, and his and Spaceballs, so the bad guy spaceship overshoots the good guys and jumps into hyperspeed and goes plaid. So if you remember that scene when they go plaid. But essentially, one of the messages that I use that scene from and a couple of the screenshots is the fact that if you're getting ready to jump to hyperspace, if you are a fraction of a degree off in your calculations, you will end up in a different galaxy, so wrong place. And the longer that you take to correct that mistaken calculation, then the more costly it is to make that fix, to correct that and get back to the right destination, to figure out where that is. And if you're, in this case, chasing the good guys, and it makes them harder to find. And so it's very costly to go and correct that mistake. And so I always say that, without having a strategy in place, and here's the heroes as they're witnessing the plaid jet trail of the bad guys as they went the wrong direction and overshot them, that they went plaid. I often refer to that. Organizations that don't do enough planning up front to really understand where they're going, and they jump out there with a witty, fun campaign, and then don't get the results that they want, right? Because they've gone plaid. They didn't plan, they didn't understand, they made all those mistakes, those common mistakes, and they didn't get the results. Shocking that they did not get the results. I've had a few clients, unfortunately, that didn't listen to the planning, had a certain direction in mind with the marketing, and went forward with that. And then me as the CMO, the fractional CMO, tried to hold me to the metrics that they thought that they would achieve, even though all of my advice, thankfully all documented, well documented, was that you're not going to achieve the numbers that you want with your plan. You're making these mistakes. In some cases, I was able to go help them kind of go in and correct those and get back on the path. But you definitely need to plan, have a set strategy. So some of the core tenets out there, I'm not going to get into all of these aspects of it, but just things to think about. So of course, going out there and doing market research, understanding what else is out there. If you think you don't have competitors, that means you're not looking hard enough. Because even if you don't have a direct competitor, if you're in a brand new category, you are a category creator, it's a product that no one's ever seen before, there are like services, like products. If people don't have your product today, they're buying something else. That is your competitor. So doing that market research, understanding the data points to help you build out your strategy. Having that branding, the look and feel, people do, they are influenced by branding. Your messaging and positioning, of course, it relies, all these things come together, but it's critical. So how you talk about the story that you tell about your product or service. The search engine optimization. So going out there and setting up your campaigns and to understand and be able to see as people react to this, to know and understand, well, we did our A/B testing and this is our third iteration, and we see that this tagline works best with this body, with this image, and so we'll use that and send that out to the majority of our list after our tests. Social network marketing. Look, there's a lot of the numbers are on a kind of a downward turn for the effectiveness through most of the most popular social networks. A little less so, but it's very expensive through like the LinkedIn advertising, where Facebook and Twitter advertising is not doing as well. And some segments is doing very well. It's great for awareness, less for getting, actionable clicks or getting, call to actions to really kind of stick. Developing personas, so to go in and refine, the customers you're trying to target. I love that process of actually putting human names on these and referring to those. When you have a well-oiled machine in sales and operations where they're talking about the personas as if they're, hey, I've got Susan on the line, and it looks like she's at the stage 4 of the decision journey. which is the next one, the customer journey, because each of those personas may follow a similar curve, but have different stages, have different assets, marketing assets that will help them move through that buying journey. And so you want to have these things defined and refined, and constantly be looking at and saying, hey, is this still Susan, or are we starting to see split off a definite, they go one way or another? And so we'll have Susan and then Rebecca as a second one, where they share the first 3 of 7 steps in that customer journey, but then they diverge, and we're seeing these patterns. And so as you are able to look at, and you have each persona mapped out in the customer journeys for each one of them, you're going to have better data around, what paths each of those are following. And then, of course, is having that story or that elevator pitch, which is a key to the beginning of all this, is that avoid going plaid. Is if your research is showing that, hey, that's different than our story for our product or service, the research is not showing that. It's going to affect every other aspect of your marketing strategy. So you need to make sure that your story and the data refine the story, refine the pitch as you learn, as your market research comes in, as you refine and perfect your messaging and positioning, as you start to get initial data back from the social network marketing, from your SEO, and as you're talking with clients and you continue to refine those personas and those journeys. All right. I'm rushing through a lot of content here, some very complex topics, but I want to hit these very quickly and then jump into the strategies. So mistake number 1 is focusing too much on the brand. And if you're not familiar with this famous, the .com or .bomb era, end of the 90s, early 2000s, pets.com failure. I don't remember the dollar amount anymore. I remember that they raised, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. It was a massive pitch of all things pet related that you could get through pets.com. And you remember this was before we had, the grocery chains that were online, and certainly before Amazon really grew to what it is today. But it was a massive failure. And I remember that when the puppet here actually sold, which it was an icon in some regions. I'm originally from the Silicon, the Bay Area, the East Bay. So I guess the tech area, the tech hub of the East Bay. This was a huge commercial push throughout the Bay Area. And so this sold for, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars. Somebody came in and bought the brand and used that for a couple of years because just people recognized the puppet, even if they didn't remember the massive failure of the. But you are not your logo. So that logo, the tagline, the color palette of your website, that is not your brand. The design elements are one aspect of that. It has more to do with your company culture, the reputation of your employees, your salespeople, the people that are out there interacting on a daily basis with prospective clients, current clients, all of your partners. That really defines who your brand is and the level of influence that you'll have in the market. There's a great saying an old coworker used to say. In fact, he'd say it to me all the time, and I was the evangelist for the software companies like, Christian, defend the brand, defend the brand. So it's why I spent a lot of time going back and working with individual salespeople that were causing some damage to the brand. It's always a sign of a salesperson who's not hitting their monthly or quarterly numbers when they start getting a bit aggressive and I don't know, mean might be the right word for it, but it's because they're not hitting their numbers. They're stressing out, and I get it. And going and trying to soften that up and to fix bad connections that were made with prospects out in the community. Because I was out there a lot of times. I'm acting as the face of the companies that I work for, and so how you interact with customers and partners is as important as the quality of the products or service that you are selling. Like this, if your brand walked into a bar, what would it start talking about? So just being sensitive to what people are talking about, feedback from the community is critical to understand how your brand is landing and how people are interpreting what your brand is. Mistake number 2 is relying too much on metrics. And I've seen this over and 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 over again, is that, again, organizations that think marketing equals SEO, that's one aspect of it. A piece of data, a slice is a slice in time. It'll give you some information to help inform decisions, but is not the end all be all. And so we're used to going in and looking at this, following and tracking the data around specific activities, call to actions within, activities on our website, around our landing pages, around email marketing campaigns, all of those things. Again, those are tools that inform us about the effectiveness on any given day as we've targeted our lists in certain markets. But it's just one aspect of what we're trying to do. You can have very effective email campaigns and see an increase in and not changed, an increase in activity at the top of your funnel, and not changed anything fundamental about the further down within your funnel, but then run into problems because there's low trust with your sales team. So it's not about what is being said or the quality of the product or service you're offering, but it might be that you have made some miscalculations in and not done training, enough training with your sales team so that you effectively move them from that MQL, the marketing qualified, into the sales qualified leads and get them into demo or trial. And so that's something that you need to be looking at end to end, that marketing experience, and not just looking at the metrics. And Ron from Panera Bread, CEO, has made this great point. He says that he sees these executives that just love their spreadsheets. And they're useful tools, but they're only tools. They tell you about a bit of data and really direct you towards trends in that data. But from there, you need to make some decisions. You can't become overly reliant on what those spreadsheets tell you. This is especially true in marketing, where you can have a campaign, a pattern or a template for your campaigns, which is great in the asset creation to say get everything in place to go launch your campaign. But if you've not made adjustments over time for changes in customer and partner and market changes, if you've not adjusted for new features, new technologies out there, and just run that same template, you're not going to be successful. And over time, customers become, they mature, they get wise to those campaigns, and it's not going to be the same thing again and again. Is not going to be effective. So they are looking for something as their interests change, and again, as they mature, their needs mature, that you need to adjust those strategies. That's why we call it the marketing mix. You're constantly adjusting each aspect of that marketing mix depending on the needs of that. Mistake number 3 is not learning from your mistakes. And I love this. If you don't know who W. Edwards Deming is, he was the principal that was sent from the U.S. over to Japan after World War II to help rebuild. There's a reason why the highest quality award you can earn in Japan in business is the Deming Award, is because he drove into the culture, helped build this idea of rapid prototype development, of iterating on, learning from, take that little bit of information we learned and then going and iterating and moving forward. But that's an important aspect of this. It's not just learning and iterating, but it's also continuing to take steps forward. Too many companies get caught up in it's not perfect yet, we're not ready with this thing, when they could have learned so much by prototyping, by going and targeting a very small subset of the market, going out there doing a trial balloon, or as we always called it, beachheads. Go find those beachhead customers, learn from them, give them a price discount, get that feedback, learn from that, fold it back into the broader strategy. and but you constantly need to be moving forward. You stop, it's like an escalator. It doesn't stop. It's either going up, it's going down. You're losing ground or you're gaining ground. There is no just sitting there waiting. Stairs doesn't work. Mistake number 4, failing to. This is where I kind of get back into my going plaid model, but I always like to liken it back to. I've run a couple startups. I was the CEO of a software company that we sold back in 2001, and we ran into this great lessons in going and pitching our company, trying to raise venture capital, and we had some great learning moments. Sitting in front of very powerful, very well-known venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, um, and it was around understanding the target market. So if you're going out there trying to build a campaign to your 10 million person in the U.S. market, and maybe 100 million people globally, that's a lot to go and build a campaign around, and it's not going to be very effective. It'll be very expensive. If you got the funds to do that, hey, more power to you. Most of us don't. And so you need to be very specific, very targeted in who you're trying to reach and how you reach them. So going out there and saying, okay, what is our total applicable or the available market? So going out there and saying, hey, in the US, we're just a North American company, and therefore it's just the 10 million people within that. Now, drilling into that, it's what's the served available market. So what can we actually go and do? Of the 10 million, you can say, well, we're only actually able to reach, let's say, 1 million of those 10 million. That's just the reality of our budget, our constraints, our ability to service those markets. Even if we had, all 10 million all want to buy our product at once, it'd break us. We couldn't be able to serve that, but we would have the ability to increase capacity and through this campaign reach the 1 million if it'd scale up to that model. What's the geographic reach? To say, well, right now we're only in the Western U.S., so we're in 6 different states, and so that's our reach with primarily California and then Washington State number 2. But we're serving these other markets as well. We're able to do that because we have our distribution centers that are on the West Coast. What are the primary channels of distribution? So thinking of, okay, how we're going to actually reach these people through the social channels, through television and radio, through newspapers, through whatever those medium are. You need to think about too. It's going to be a subset of that 1 million. So you've got, let's say, your geographic reach. So of the million that you're actually able to serve, the geographic reach is maybe 500,000 of those through the primary channels. There's 5 or 6 different channels through video, through commercials, through conferences. You're going to be able to really reach about, let's say, 200,000 of that 500,000. Who are the key partners for sales and marketing within those channels? So each of those is going to have a reach. And so as that breaks down, then you start to understand, the cost of going and reaching through these target partners that are in through these primary channels that we're going to go out through. We're really trying to reach about 50,000 target customers. Here's the cost of that. Here's our average sale. And then you can start to understand the ROI of the marketing spend that you go and do as you break this down, and you know what to go and do next. And then you can even start to look at and say, well, while there are fewer customers within these other smaller segments, yes, but the cost to reach them is actually lower. It's easier for us to reach some of the long tail clients in these other states than through our target market in the primary states of California and Washington State, for example. So these are all things which will help inform how you develop a strategy. Mistake number 5 is failing to understand and connect with your community. This is one I talk. I'm constantly pointing people towards this. Look, I'm a collaboration technology guy, and that's what the focus of this book was, a social organization. So Bradley and McDonald both came out of Gartner, but they talk about 3 things which are very relevant in the marketing world. And so I'm constantly talking to people about their marketing strategy about the same thing. And this is kind of a recap of the previous mistake that companies make. But it's one, understanding the community that you're trying to reach. So obviously, if you're trying to go and reach that 10 million, potential customers, and maybe advertising as part of the Super Bowl is the right strategy for reaching that broad, casting that broad net out. But how you communicate and the message to that 10 million is very different than the 50,000 within the 4 or 5 Western states outside of California and Washington. So going and building a strategy around it definitely relies on understanding who the community is, that truly that target market. Second is the social, which is about the communication methods, so the social structures of that community. Reaching 10 million, the mechanisms for reaching them are going to be very different than the methods reaching that very targeted sub-community of the 50,000 users. And so, understanding the channels through which and the methods by which that target market communicates, or that community that you're trying to reach, is going to be key, again, to spending the right dollars at the right time in the right place for that 50,000 prospects versus reaching that 10 million. And then your sense of purpose will also be different. You have to have a very broadly defined purpose for the 10 million customers. It needs to be broadly appealing to them, versus you can be very targeted, very specific, and it'll likely be much more effective if it's more personal. The chances of connecting with the 50,000 are greater than through that 10 million with that broad message. And that's why those broad branded, it's more about branding activities, those kinds of campaigns don't have the results as of these targeted campaigns. It's why you see so much in modern digital marketing turn towards this account-based or the personalized marketing strategies, where it can even get down to that individual level, where the company targets you as being that that target client, the right role, the right company size, the right industry, the right needs expressed, the budget that's in place, all of those things. And then suddenly you have what's very personalized campaign that seems like it's directed at you individually. It's because it is. That's where we're going as marketers, as advertisers, to be able to reach people on that individual basis. Of course, through a lot of scraping of data out from the net, and hopefully all of those things legitimate or ethically captured. It's why you want to do those pull marketing and not the push marketing campaigns that Seth Godin talked about in permission marketing. But this is critical as part of your planning, to understand the community, the methods through which people communicate within that community, and then the purpose that's unique to that community. Another way of reaching that is through understanding who the influencers are within those communities and tailoring those messages for those influencers. And look, there's a lot of strategies for this, because those influencers, you can reach one person who is that influencer within an organization, and they can turn the entire organization in your direction. Finding that person, it's not always the person that you're trying to actually sell to write that check. But finding that person is why that customer journey, while you may have a specific persona that you're selling to, the customer journey should also help you to define who those influencers are that can help move that persona, that target customer forward. And just because something is difficult to measure doesn't mean it doesn't have value, because look, doing identifying measurements around especially around influencers, who they are and the impact that they have in an organization, it's very difficult to capture that, especially coming from the outside. I'd say it's near impossible to do from the outside. But it doesn't mean that it's not worth pursuing that, to try to identify that. At least make your sales and product teams, your service people, support people aware of this idea of an influencer and identifying who those people are. And usually you can see that through interaction, through social channels, how passionate they are in their interactions with at all different levels. And you might say that, hey, here's somebody who's the actual buyer, who is definitely an influencer within their organization, and because they buy the product and then they just take it and run with it. They're talking about it. They're giving they're giving great scores out on surveys. They're commenting out on social networks and all those kinds of things. It's worthwhile and following up and supporting those people, because even after the sale can add a lot of value and drive a lot of business to your company. And it does make sense to ensure that every customer interaction, so end to end, don't end with the sale, but from that first touch to the ongoing, to informing them of new versions, new changes in industry that are impacting the purchase that they made a year or two ago. That is going to develop the kind of advocacy that you want to have that long-term success. Why are champions important? There's great data that came out of the Microsoft Office 365 team about identifying influencers. Again, I think this is also very relevant to your marketing campaigns, is that if you're able to go in there, what it shows is that as people are heavily influenced by these individuals within their organization that may not be part of that signing off on that buyer journey and buying decisions. But the content that's out there, the campaigns, what this isn't showing, of course, is the marketing campaigns. But if you think about all of that, I think it's lower on the helpful, but is critical as a cumulative effect to decision making. But it's influencers rank very high on that list. So if you can reach those and identify those influencers, then it is going to expedite that buying decision journey with your target customer. And so they help. How they do that through building groundswell, so talking about it, advocating for it. They are reaching out to those that are in their circle. They're constantly looking at how they can better leverage that. They're providing product feedback. So not just identifying business challenges, but possible solutions. I've seen this where people come back and with products that I've helped, again, in the software space, where they've come back with reports that we hadn't thought of. We're like, that's a great idea. We know dozens of clients that could benefit from that. And so that's why influencers or champions are so your organization. So building your above the line marketing strategy, and here's where I want to focus on. I've got 8 strategies here. I'm going to run through very quickly. I'm not going to go through every bullet here because it's a lot of content. Go download the slides, go out to slideshare.net and search for my name, Christian Buckley. You will find the slides. I'll link it here in the description for the YouTube video. But here's the traditional consumer decision journey, developing trust. So there's a consider and buy. They've never heard of it. Hey, I want to take a look at this. You're trying to drive them towards the purchase. They'll go in. There's content. There's marketing. There's nurturing to get them to evaluate. And then you're building that trust so that they'll make the purchase. My argument is that that's not really that's not all of the decision. There's the measurement that you need to be striving for is you've got that install and activation, that first touch. Again, I'm taking it from the software perspective, but that call to action is you want them to go in there to try it, to get their hands on it. 2 is to adopt it, to start actually using it. 3 is that they're fully engaged. It's not just that they're in there, it's that it's become part of the way that they work. And then 4th is that they're then talking about it, building advocacy. So your nurturing, your strategy needs to be thinking of moving clients through this well beyond purchasing, so that they are your salespeople. They're your best salespeople, and that they're referring people in to buy your product. So how you can do that? So there's that core messaging. Be clear on what you want to achieve. So is it, something that is an aspect of that campaign? What is your goal here to go and do? Is it there's all of these different things that you could be building on that can be part of the overall strategy. But what is your content strategy around that? I always talk about, and this is critical for digital marketing, creating the pillars or the hero content. And so this might be an ebook, a white paper, a video, some piece of content that you could go and build, which really defines what you're trying to accomplish. And so I love the idea for companies to go out there. It's almost like a manifesto type piece that outlines, here's who we are, this is what we're trying to do, this is the way that we believe we see the world as working, and what we're trying to do to make it better. That hero piece from which you're able to go and build other derivative work. So from that, you can build that tactical media plan, you can build content, blog content, other feature articles. I refer to these as derivative articles. So if you have your blog content, your primary piece built off of, let's say, a white paper. You have your social media posts, the blog posts, which are subsets of that hero piece. You have posts that you might do over on LinkedIn, or have key people within your organization on their personal blogs write about that, all tying back to that hero piece, or those core, those pillared blog posts that point back to that white paper. The social blitz around that. Don't just go out there and tweet once or twice with the same content. I train people all the time on effective social media. Remember, social media is fleeting. Twitter, you go out there and you post an article, you tweet once. If it goes out in the morning, you tweet a version of that tweet later that day. Again, the next day, because people weren't online, they didn't see it, they may not be following your feed. Also, 2-3 days later, again with another derivative of that tweet, and then at least 8 to 10 days later, and then depending on if it's evergreen content, then just set it up so that every 2-3 weeks you have a couple times that you have that tweet going out, or a version of that tweet, each time with different images. And that's for Twitter. LinkedIn, it's not going to be as frequent, but again, there's turnover. You want to have some variations there. So you have that strategy, those social pages, have your landing page that's built out, have that AdWord campaign that's then built out, and a nurturing campaign depending on people that download or don't download. If there's people that you know that haven't opened that, if people who have they're already in your system, you see that they've read those core blog posts but have not clicked on and downloaded that new hero white paper. And so each of these are versions of our email nurturing campaign to reach each segment of your database to make sure that they are moving along that decision towards your product or service. You need to make sure that your content marketing strategy, of course, consistent, multi-layered. I just joked, I had good friends that with another company, very successful with their marketing campaigns, and said, well, our strategy is to have fewer, higher quality pieces in our marketing strategy. I said, oh, that's interesting. My strategy is to have more frequent, high quality pieces. And I was just joking with them. I realized that how hard creating quality content can be. But my argument for most organizations, and this is part of what I consult with companies around, if anybody's interested in buying a block of my hours, I'm happy to advise you on this, but that they are not properly leveraging their hero content, or starting from the hero content piece, that creating the quality content out of those hero pieces is much easier than they think, and they're leaving a lot of quality content out on the table that they're not taking advantage of. And then, of course, being strategic in your content and building out that multi-layered high volume of content. I think there's definitely strategies to how you do that, and not putting all your eggs in one basket of one piece. Again, spread that out. Understand that people have short attention spans and you may only capture their attention with 1 or 2 bullets. So if you have those key bullets buried within a 2,000 word article or blog post, they're never going to find it. Break that lengthy piece out into 10 distinctive strategic posts, and you're more likely to capture the attention of people. So take note, I talked about this earlier. Marketing copy, smart copy is not the same as that authentic valued content. So it's not just about writing to fit your marketing message. Far too much content is written based on the keywords you're trying to target. Wrong approach. That is where people see through it. It's not authentic. You're not building thought leadership. You're not convincing people, maybe in the short term, but you're not going to progress people through that customer journey. It's obviously marketing copy and not thought leadership piece. There's a difference there. As I say here, it's more about providing an education and demonstrating that knowledge upon that brand. Strategy tip number 2, identifying your target. Again, I won't go through all the data here about personas. I think if you have spent any time in the marketing space, you understand this. Most people, they do it very high level. It's an iterative process. You need to be very clear for each of those personas to understand what are the specific problem areas that this persona is faced in with their role and how that ties back to your product or service. And then what's needed to solve the problem. It could be the same problem area, the same problem space with two personas, and yet how they solve it, how they go about that could be very different. And that's the difference between the personas. And then how your company solves the problem. Again, you may be reusing the same content for each of those personas, but you need to personalize those so that they feel like, hey, this is, you can't just send something for that's a support person to somebody in HR. And it's they look at their roles very different. They're very different roles. Even though the problem you might be solving for them might be unique, you need to personalize it for each of those personas. Very critical. And then map your message to each persona. This is that. So you need to go and map. And I always tell organizations that you hopefully have gone through and done a content inventory and mapped out to keywords, to critical keywords, as well as to the problem areas and the personas, and have that matrix in front of you so that you know then as you run into a problem area, you should be able to see that this problem area, it's really only seen by these 3 of our 7 personas that we sell to. And that you start to see that there's a trend now as the technology has changed, as the business needs have changed, you're starting to see a 4th persona start to experience and identify this other problem area that you didn't see before. Well, then you are informed and know to go change up your campaigns if you've been smart and map that out. So doing your homework here and mapping that out and having that matrix across those personas critical to success, and it's going to allow your salespeople, anybody that touches the public, to better be able to answer their questions and serve their needs. And especially if you get smart in being able to look at and tie within your CRM to know which marketing assets, which campaigns that client has seen, that they've opened, that they've responded to, so that you're answering your question. You don't answer them, respond to them by sending them to a white paper or an article that they've already downloaded, already read, and you've got that data. But you know that, to be able to, a salesperson to be able to be informed and be able to say, well, I know you've downloaded that white paper. Did you have a chance to take a look at that? Oh, you've read it. There's this other article with this infographic, which I think will really help make this point and answer this question. I mean, that's the way that you should be able to respond in those interactions, informed interactions based on that data that's coming from your marketing automation and your CRM platform. Your goal, of course, with each of this, it should be to be able to answer those things very quickly. Send for those people that want to read more, have more content. For those people that are more interested in video content and on demand, have those assets. Be able to point them to the types of material, and this is why I say that the future of digital marketing is powered by content. There are so many other channels through which, again, all fall back and rely on that content and having all those things aligned. But having all those things in that matrix, all those assets to be able to turn to answer these questions and meet these client needs is going to help further them down that customer journey. And then, of course, watch out for trends. Constantly pay attention to what your competitors are doing. This is also important, as I said before, of staying above the line with your marketing, being aware that suddenly your competitors are starting to do some of the things that you've been doing in your above the line marketing activities. Change it up, change the marketing mix. Find those things which are going to continue to be authentic and build trust, but help you stand out. Strategy number 4, organized by your method. And so this is, of course, refining and that outline of how you're going forward. The channels that you're going to reach is always, you're constantly mixing that up. There's a great book that's out there. Don't have it in front of me. Just thought I should include it in my slides here. But it's called Traction. And it walks through, I think, around 19 different channels that it outlines. A lot of the below the line marketing, the common things that are out there, but it goes into depth and talks about things, these other roads less traveled, these other channels, these other methods for distinguishing yourself from your competitors, and developing strategy. So I talked about earlier in tracking the cost of your marketing efforts, the customer acquisition. And it may be that you're not getting as many customers through other channels, but the cost is far lower per client, and so it's an effective way that maybe it's less traveled by your competitors, other channels that you need to go investigate. So check out that. One of my tactics is I use OneNote as a publishing source. So as I create content, as I identify competitors in their campaigns, their strategies, and I add everything into one place, OneNote, Evernote, whatever tool that you use there. But the idea is that when I'm going and I'm researching a new strategy, one of the first places that I go to research of what's out there is OneNote. And it's like an extension of my brain. It captures all this data, all this information. It's quicker for me to pull this up than it is out of a content collaboration system or knowledge management platform. And it just very quickly it says I'm going and building add a tagline or ask questions about content and looking at other things. And I'm good about when I have content that's been published, and I'll put links to the landing pages, to the published articles, to the LinkedIn or Medium posts or my personal blog posts, or when partners or customers have retweeted or posted quotes to my articles on their websites, and I add all those links. And so when I go and I'm searching on a strategy, putting something new together, new ideas, I see what has been effective. I can go leverage all of this other content and all this other research to know what has been effective. And so here's an example here, but how I will often go and create derivative work. And I'll go write about it on my site. I'll go expand on that topic. I'll write about things that are this, this top level or hero type content, and then I'll go and write different perspectives on that. I'll do a neutral educational view out for a site like CMS Wire or Redmond Magazine. I might then go over to Medium where I'll do a deep dive into one specific area subset of that topic and do a deep dive, more technical view into that. And so right there I might have my company blog post, which is that hero piece, my personal blog post, something out on Medium, something out on LinkedIn or out on Redmond Magazine, that are all touch on those same key topics of that message I'm trying to convey. And then I have, if I can provide links on some of those, like on the personal blog and Medium, LinkedIn, back to that original source, I've created these inbound links. I might find people that are more interested in the business focused perspective out on LinkedIn, or the more in-depth technical view that's out on Medium, on my Medium blog, that may never find the blog post on my personal blog post at buckleyplanet.com, or never find it on the company website. And so that's just an effect to split up and have a different voice, slightly different message tuned towards each of those channels. Dividing your messages by voice. What I just talked about kind of I bled into that topic, but I always say that, especially with your social promotion, I do this a little bit when I'm write that core piece, and then I write derivative works for my personal blog, for the company blog, for LinkedIn, Medium, and other public sources, neutral sources. But there's also the splitting that up and talking about the corporate voice, that promotional voice, like here's our product, go check it out. That subject matter expert or SME voice, which is it's more I'm trying to educate, whether or not you ever go look at what my company is selling. Here's my experience, here's what I've seen, here's the gaps that I see in the product or service or in the industry today. And then there's also that personal voice where people like to remember, like, hey, you're not trying to sell to me, you're not trying to educate me, you're an actual human being. And so a great way to convey this is, and I'm talking about content in general, but I think that of your social promotions should follow the same rule of the thirds. About a third of what you tweet out, for example, on Twitter, should be, here's what my company's doing, download this white paper, register for our webinar, we just released our new product, check it out. A third of your messages should be that. A third of your messages should then be that SME expertise. Retweeting what other experts have said, industry leaders, here's research that's out there, where you're not pitching anything, it is pure education. You're demonstrating your thought leadership and trying to provide value. What would be of value to your followers? And then a third of it should be, hey, here's pictures of us at our booth from our event last week. Here's our last company outing, our watermelon eating contest. People like to know that they're human beings that they're interacting with. When you have that rule of the thirds in place with your content in general, you'll have the most effective consumption of that content. Because while people may be interested in it, this webinar, they will then be sold on signing up when they have, they see that, oh, I see that they're constantly sharing out best practices from this OEM around this service. For example, I work in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm a Microsoft partner, and so I'm constantly retweeting things that I find of value from other leaders, other experts, and partners within the community that I want to make sure that my followers have also seen. But likewise, if I'm doing a road trip, there'll be pictures of me, in my food. Occasionally I'll tweet a picture of my dogs, my emotionally needy little dogs, so that people see that there's a person behind all these tweets as well. I actually get the highest level of interaction from those personal tweets. But then I see people that will like a picture of my dogs and then like an invitation to join the webinar, which was the next post down. It's just the way that people consume. So anyway, I basically, through these bullets here, go through and repeat what I just said. Sorry, I don't have my preview view to know what builds are here. But strategy number 6, keeping your messaging. I've said this a few times. It's not just about going and reaching that broadest, largest audience. Sometimes it's about drilling down and providing something that may only be useful to 1 out of 20 of my readers, 1 out of 100, but be very specific and be what they need, because it's an important point. I want to make sure that 1 out of 20 people have that content. It is important if you have tie-ins to news of the day, industry trends. Again, I work in the Microsoft ecosystem, so Microsoft is constantly innovating, especially this era of evergreen software that's coming through as a service. There's constantly features and updates across just about every workload. And so I'm constantly picking through all of that news to find out what's relevant to my clients for the things that I focus on their behalf. Be authentic. Tip number 7, and this is just to what you're talking about, what you're sharing with. Be open and honest. I always say that this is especially true for salespeople. When people ask questions and you don't know, don't fake it. Unless you're a salesperson with an engineering background, to try and guess through the specifics where you need to be a solution architect or an engineer to understand how to answer the question in their need. And there are salespeople, plenty of salespeople that are like that have that background and who can do that. But for the rest of us, don't do it. Say, I don't know. Let me get somebody from my team to answer that, or let me get back to you around that. And people appreciate that so much more authentic. It's true in your campaigns and in your content. Talk about what's positive about your company, about your product or service, without breaking down, your competitors. Any negative, it just reflects poorly on yourself. It never, ever has the effect that you think it will on your competitors by pulling people away. Instantly diminishes the level of trust you might have already built up, and it gives you no authenticity with that customer. So they can see right through it. I've talked about bad content, bad copy, marketing copy versus thought leadership. But ultimately, your marketing, and especially your content marketing, it's not about that quick win. It's about the long game. It's about understanding the end-to-end experience that your client is going through, of which your product or service may only service one little piece of that journey, or not that journey, that experience of that client, of what they're trying to accomplish. So don't try to be that end-all be-all. Understand your place, within the universe there, and have honest conversations about how you can improve that little slice of that customer experience. But if the better you can understand where that customer is, the more empathy that you can add, the more authentic that conversation will be with that client. Strategy number 8, don't just sit there, move forward. I talked about this with the Deming. It really goes back to this came out. Again, it's a little bit blurry there. I think that was actually 97 when this came out, because it was just after I started my MBA. This came out. Of course, Fast Company was still, it was like a year old. It was fantastic. I think it was initially every other month. So this is back in that era, August, September, as you can see. And this article called The Brand Called You. And there's been a couple updates to it by Drucker. Definitely go check that out, where he talks about building that out, and he talks about trust and authenticity. Most of the themes that I talked about, how important that is. You're not going to be perfect out the door. You're not going to be perfect with all of your campaigns. But the important thing to remember, and he talked about this in this article, is getting started and iterating on that, improving, get feedback. I'm not a fan of corporate 360-degree feedback, the whole review process, because usually it's not the process, it's how they're executed. They're just so poorly, and it usually diminishes the relationship of the employee and the employer, of the manager and the direct report, because it's not done right. There are very few good managers out there who know how to do that well. So be careful, managers. But one of the things is that, provide that feedback of, and rather than or as but statements are bad, but and statements. So, the way that you did this, it didn't have the affected, but, and I think that there are ways that you can leverage what you did and build upon that as much more positive than saying but, or just telling people flat out they failed. Anyway, I don't want to get into leadership development as a topic, but there's a modern update on that. I think that the way that I advise, especially startups and entrepreneurs, but understand as a product or service, your unique value proposition is so core to that brand called you. Be able to tell your story, have that elevator pitch. I started this off by saying, hey, and this is something I've refined, thought about, talked to people about, but I have it down to my little one sentence. It's my foot in the door. Collab Talk, we are an independent research and technical marketing services company. And the next step to that is people say, oh, oh, what do you do around research? And it's like, well, and then I go in with a slightly longer pitch. Or if they say, oh, what does that mean? Technical marketing services, what do you do? And so I jump into the next, statement there. But be able to tell that story, break it down into that simple, convey that message, get people to ask that next question of, oh, really? What do you mean by that? Or what do you do in that area? And start that conversation. And that's how it begins. Leverage your influence. So to understand, your role out there, to go out there and build that thought leadership, to build that influence. Don't abuse it, leverage it, understand your role. Far too many potential clients approach and say, oh, great, Christian, you've got tens of thousands of followers, you are well known in these spaces, and we'd like to hire you, put your name on stuff, and then, thinking that, oh, just the customers will flock that way. And so to try to advise them is like, that's not how that, certainly my influence works. I'm sure that you have Oprah or Michelle Obama go out there, or anyone else that has tens of millions of followers and says, go use this product or go try this service, or I just dropped by this restaurant, and you'll have just people flocking to that. For the most of us that have influence in our respective circles, that's not how it works. So don't abuse that. Leverage that, not abuse it. Defend your brand. So be aware of how people in your organization are talking or interacting with prospective clients and existing clients, and ensure that end-to-end experience, every single touch point with the customer along the way, that you have planned around and are thoughtfully thinking about the best way to interact. And then embrace change. Recognize that there's always going to be change and be ready for it. Create an organization that you're constantly looking at, how can we operationally, from marketing, from sales perspective, look at how can we improve, and you'll better be able to react to as changes that come down, because you're already establishing your organization to look for and adapt to change. So embrace it. If you've got a bunch of competitors, the company that can more quickly adapt to and embrace that change is going to win. Some final thoughts. So I just thought it was funny that the Tide, back to the brand, it's there's a reason why that brand called you article pointed to Tide, because ultimately this is all just a Tide commercial, right? Yeah. So for your organization, find the baseline and rise above it. Of course, I can't help if there's anybody out there, please be a few of you who are huge fans of the movie Spinal Tap, as I am. I love the line when Nigel Tufnell is just like, it's like, well, there's a rise above it. But find out what your competitors are doing, be aware of their strategies, and do something different. Figure out what is the right mix of activities, those other channels that are out there that are available, that are going to be a differentiator for you. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, cbuck@collabtalk. You can follow me on Twitter at Buckley Planet. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over the social channels. I'd love to talk to you more about, if you'd like to buy a block of my time and set up a couple discovery sessions and get some overall analysis of your website, your product and service offerings. I do that for companies all the time. I'd love to talk to you about that. It's not as expensive as you think. It's well worth your time. But you can contact me, of course, through my website, collabtalk.com. We've got our form there, or give me a call. And thanks a lot for watching this. And hopefully if you're able to employ some of these tips, then your digital marketing will suck just a little bit less. Thanks a lot. Bye.